Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Donald Trump is maintaining his front-runner status in the GOP race for president. He swept the Nevada caucuses earlier this week. Next stop, Super Tuesday. Will Trump's momentum continue, or will Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz challenge his dominance? Here to put it all in perspective, I'm joined by the editor-in-chief of CNS News, Terry Jeffrey. Terry,
hey, Ray,
thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with two bites. This is Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They're at rallies in Houston, and they took a decidedly different tack this week after weeks of hands-off Donald Trump. Watch.
We can't be fooled by P.T. Barnum. The time for the clowns and the acrobats and the dancing bears has passed.
The front runner in this race, Donald Trump, has actually alluded to the fact that he thinks parts of Obamacare are pretty good. I can tell you, everybody running for president tells you, I want to get rid of Obamacare. I'm the only one that's ever done anything about it.
Should they have gone after Trump earlier?
Yes.
Is it too late?
Yes, I think they, in the press, I don't think it's too late. I don't think Trump has the nomination sewn up. But I think there's a serious question about how Donald Trump has arrived at the policy positions he has, particularly since the positions he has now are quite different from ones he had 10 years ago.
Well, he wasn't a public figure, though. He was a businessman.
Well, but he was flirting with running for president all the way back in 1999. He was positioning himself as the pro-partial birth abortion Donald Trump in 1999. Now he's the ostensibly pro-life Donald Trump. But for example, on that issue, Raymond, I've never seen a rational, systematic, logical argument out of this man of where his pro-life position came from and what the reasoning is behind it. I've not seen that. And it's not just a pro-life issue. I think that Donald Trump needs to be forced to explain himself in a rational way on all his policy positions, because I think the question that voters need to have about someone like Trump, who has never served in public office, is, can we trust this person to do, if he is elected, what he's saying now, particularly when he has a record of flip-flopping on so many issues?
In Nevada, he won 46% of the vote, Rubio 24, Cruz 21.
Right.
This is a rather remarkable turnabout in a state like Nevada. Now, granted, it is a caucus and not a primary, which is a different system, but still, 46% is pretty incredible.
Well, it is. I mean, there's no doubt that Donald Trump has a very powerful message. It appeals to a lot of Republican voters. I think it appeals to a lot of people outside the Republican Party. I think particularly what he said about border security, enforcing the immigration laws, what he said about trade, which is an issue the other Republican candidates
don't even mention,
aren't really talking about. And I also think the way he's positioned himself on foreign policy, where he doesn't want to advance an interventionist, nation-building foreign policy. I think Americans are generally with Trump on those issues, and I think probably the majority Republican primary voters are too.
We keep hearing the conversation that if Rubio or Cruz gets out of this race, the other guy will benefit and they can beat Trump. Do you agree with that math? Does that really work out?
Not necessarily, because I think that a lot of the people who are supporting Cruz probably are closer to Trump on the issues than they are to Rubio.
Right.
I think that basically Cruz is positioned very similarly to Trump on the issues. Marco Rubio is a little different, particularly on immigration, but also on foreign policy. And clearly Marco Rubio has definitely taken that interventionist. He's much more aggressive in terms of how the United States ought to assert itself, particularly, for example, in the Middle East than either Cruz or Trump. So I think it is possible that if Cruz dropped out, some of his support would go to Trump.
Yeah.
And if Trump's already in the 40s, there's a question of what happens there.
Yeah, that's my sense. I don't think it's a fait accompli that all those voters suddenly migrate to one or the other candidate. At best, he'll split them. At worst, for them, he'll take a majority of them. And the Cruz vote, I think most of those people are Tea Party evangelicals.
And the immigration issue is particularly important to many voters. And I think with Trump taking such a dramatic position, he's going to secure the border, he's going to enforce the immigration law, and Marco Rubio, having been a co-sponsor of the Gang of Eight, that's a real question.
That's a liability for Marco Rubio. Let's talk about Florida and Texas. If these candidates, Rubio and Cruz, lose their home states, can they progress? I want to put up the most recent polls, just so everybody can see this. Texas, this is the Real Clear Politics average of Texas. Cruz is at 33%, Trump is at 28%, Rubio 18%, and the others afterward. Kasich 8%, Carson 5%. Then there's this Texas Emerson poll, Emerson University. Cruz is at 29%, Trump is at 28%. Can Trump close this gap?
Well, it's crucial for Ted Cruz to win Texas. Texas is his home state, and it's also a big group of delegates, and it's coming up on Tuesday.
Really his last firewall.
He needs to win Texas. And then we have, in the middle of March, Florida. And Rubio is going to have to win Florida. If they don't win those states, I don't see how they
That's
stop.
it, really.
I don't see how. If Trump has another big day on Tuesday, and that includes winning Texas, I think it changes everything. I think Cruz must win Texas.
In Florida, I'll put these polls up. Florida, Trump, 40%. Cruz, 19%. Rubio, 14%.
Yeah.
That's the Real Clear Politics average.
Well, you know, when Rubio got into the race, he said he wasn't going to run for the Senate again in Florida. So he put all his chips in. Without question, if Marco Rubio is still in this race in the middle of March, he needs to win Florida. And which means the Republicans need to have a serious debate on the issues. As I said, I don't think that Trump's thinking on these issues is clear. And I think a major question that people have about Trump is this guy simply taking this, is this a marketing campaign or is this a political campaign? Has this candidate figured out that there's certain issues that politicians in Washington won't talk about, or if they do talk about, they've acted in a different and hypocritical way, that he can capitalize on in this campaign when he may not have any real interest in carrying through on those if he's elected president, nor that he's actually thought through in a rational and systematic way in arriving at those positions. So I think it's crucial in the next 2 weeks for the other candidates to challenge him on those issues and for the media to challenge him on those issues.
What happens after Super Tuesday? Let's assume neither of these Cruz and Rubio lose their home states. What happens?
Well, I think one thing you're going to see is that whoever emerges as the Republican nominee is going to be the target of a brutal onslaught by the liberal media. Yeah. The establishment media in this country is liberal. They do not want to see a Republican elected. They don't want to see someone elected who's arguing for the things that Donald Trump has argued. So if Trump is the nominee, what you're going to see is a brutal onslaught against Donald Trump. And there'll be not a commensurate onslaught against Hillary Clinton if she happens to be the Democratic nominee.
I want to play something for you while we speak of the Democratic nominees. This is Bernie Sanders in Nevada, advertising his anti-establishment credentials. Watch.
I think everyone knows taking on the establishment, whether it is the financial establishment, whether it is the political establishment, whether it is the media establishment, is not easy. We have come a very long way in 9 months.
How far will that take him?
Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders, this anti-establishment.
Well, there's a certain power to it. In a way, he's doing from the left what Donald Trump is doing on the right. In some ways, they're talking about some of the same issues.
They are. They're touching the same voting, where the voters are anyway.
Right. And but I think he's got a tough road to beat Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. I mean, he seemed to be fading in Nevada. Yeah. And I think that I don't see Bernie Sanders getting the nomination.
No, these numbers are brutal. Yeah. Clinton is 48.7 in Nevada. Sanders is 46.3, so that's close. Texas, she's at 61, he's at 32%. Florida, same scenario. Hillary Clinton's at 64%, Sanders at 25%.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of where this investigation, and there are 3 concurrent investigations into Hillary Clinton and this email server. This judge recently said her aides should be sworn under oath. They should be questioned about whether they were out to thwart justice by creating this email server. Where does this go? Will she be indicted?
I don't know. I mean, you hear people who have a very serious understanding of this more than I do, who think she's got a real problem. And I do think that the inspector generals in both the intelligence community and the State Department have done an excellent job in looking into this. The inspector general of the intelligence community, Charles McCullough, sent a letter to members of Congress. He also sent it to the Clapper, the DNI, in which he said that representatives of 2 elements of the intelligence community provided sworn statements to his office saying that, among other things, that there were information and emails on Hillary Clinton's server that were derived from classified intelligence community sources. So that's a serious issue. Whether she gets indicted, I don't know, but there's obviously a
big liability for her. I need to return to Donald Trump. He's clearly making a play for religious voters this time out. He was at Pat Robertson's Regent University in Virginia the other day, and he addressed the Pope's recent critique of the Trump plan to build a wall at the border.
He was a little bit strong at first. Sort of interesting because it was the day before the election, right? And I said to myself, oh, no. And my people came up to me. They said, Mr. Trump, the Pope just made a big statement about you. I said, good or bad? I said, oh, this is a disaster. And it turned out to be that he talked about the border. And he did mention the wall. And then I said, the first thing I thought of, I said, but I've seen the Vatican. That's the most incredible wall. That wall goes up to that ceiling, right? I said, what about this? So I think he actually took a little heat. Nobody explained to him about the crime. Nobody explained to him about the drugs pouring across and the economy. And he was actually very nice.
Well,
what do you make of this?
First of all, I think Trump's bigger problem with people who take seriously the moral crisis in our country, and there is a moral crisis in this country, is where he actually stands on abortion and where he stands on marriage. Like I said, I haven't been thoroughly explored. He hasn't rationally explained himself. I think he needs to be forced to. On the question of the wall, I would say this. The first question I think for a Catholic ought to be, is this a just law? Is the border of the United States a just law, or is it an unjust law? I think it's clearly a just law. Not only do we have a right to have a border, but we are very compassionate and liberal, really, in the way we enforce that. We allow about 1 million legal immigrants in a year. We allow people in asylum status and refugee status if they fear persecution in their own countries. And I think that all that is good. So the question is building a effectively impermeable wall at the Mexican border a proportionate and discriminating way of enforcing a just law? And I would say it is. And in fact, I would say it's morally superior because it actually is going to protect human life. If we effectively are telling people who are trying to smuggle drugs, the cartels across the border, you're not getting across, that's going to help reduce the crime on the Mexican border communities, where there's incredible crime now because of the drug cartels. Also, if the drugs aren't coming across the people in our communities here in the United States that are being harmed by drugs coming from Mexico and drug criminals related to the Mexican cartels, that harm is going to be done. And then there's the attractive, the moral hazard of basically letting people know south of the border that they may be able to sneak across our border, Raymond, and therefore they can risk, or they're tempted to risk, that dangerous move across the desert where they may have to deal with human traffickers and where they may suffer a real tragedy in their life because of the conditions that they go through. So to me, building barriers at the border that deter people from trying to come across and stop people effectively from crossing illegally is a good thing because it is a proportionate and discriminate enforcement of a just law. So Trump is right about the policy on that one.
Let's figure out, quickly, we only have a minute left, evangelicals in Nevada broke for Trump 41%. Cruz only got 27% of evangelicals.
Right.
As I talk to Catholics and evangelicals, I do scratch my head because here you've got a thrice married individual,
right.
A man who he drops all kinds of language from the pulpit and the podium. He's not the first instinctive candidate that you would expect evangelicals or faith-based people to run toward. Here's what they tell me. You know what? We've been hearing our co-religionists all these years tell us X, Y, and Z. We've voted for them, we've supported them, and they've either lost or they haven't given us what they promised. So we're going for Trump. It seems they're putting those social issues that you're raising on the back burner, willing to focus now on the economy, immigration, and trade, and that those issues are preeminent.
Yeah.
Where am I wrong?
Well, I think you're right. I think there's a powerful reaction to those issues, and I think there needs to be a more careful examination of the other issues. And as I see it, I think there's a crisis in our country that's coming, driven by both cultural and economic factors, and they're interwoven. And Donald Trump, if he's going to be our president, better have serious answers to them. And I'm not sure he's laid those out in this campaign.
We'll keep watching. Terry Jeffrey, thank you so much for being
Raymond.
here. As always, you can catch all of Terry's columns and analysis at cnsnews.com.